Hey everyone, we are on our fourth video now. We're still in the book of Genesis. Now remember, we're not going to be doing this with every book of the Bible, but Genesis is such an integral book to begin everything that God did. This is why I try to study Genesis every year, go back through it and go back through it and go back through it, because all of life, literally, that starts is in Genesis. And so we're going to finish up today with the story of Joseph. And it's important for us to understand this story, not because Joseph is a fascinating character. That's fine and that's good. We'll talk a lot about that and how that works. But at the end of it, I'm going to tie it all together for you, because I want you to understand why Joseph was a central figure and why what happens out of this story is the real story and the most important thing. We know the story of Joseph and Broadway's made the Technicolor Dreamcoat and Joseph and the Coat of Many Colors and all the stories from Bible school and all that stuff. But there's a reason that this is important. So Joseph is the next to youngest child of Jacob or Israel. So now remember, up to this point, we've got a promise to Abraham. We've got a promise to Jacob, who's renamed Israel, and no people. We've got a few families, then that's it. We got his family, and it's fairly large with 12 kids, but that's it. There's no nation of Israel. There's no Hebrew people at this point in time. So that's why this story becomes important. So we'll walk through Joseph for just a minute. A lot of commentators say Joseph is a kind of a Christ figure because he comes in a role of salvation after going through some suffering. Joseph, it's not recorded in Scripture that he ever committed a sin, unless arrogance maybe is a sin in there. I don't know. I don't really hold to that a whole lot, but you will hear that from time to time as part of the figure of it. But what we do know about Joseph, at 17 years old, even before that, he's having these dreams. And these dreams are indicating, because God's giving him the dreams, that something great is going to happen with his life. Now, whether it's arrogance or not, he's telling his brothers, he's telling his father that one day in the dream, the sun and moon bow down to his star and all those kind of things. But I don't think it's arrogance. I think he's just kind of matter of fact saying, this is what God is telling me. This is what the dreams are. And he has this ability to understand and see his dreams to a degree, but he believes that they're from God. He really does. And that'll come out a little bit later as well. So, long story short, we're going to go through this pretty quickly. Joseph's brothers get jealous of him because the father gives him the coat that's got a lot of color, and it shows that he's a favored child. Joseph is following his brothers, checking on them for his father, going to give a bad report because he finds them not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so just practical kind of Joseph, they know he's going to go back and rat them out. So in this one particular case, they find him and they get mad at him. They're tired of this. They're tired of the jealousy. And they throw him into a well and say, hey, you know what? We're done with this. And some of the brothers are so jealous and so mad they want to kill him. Well, one of the brothers, Reuben, decides, hey, I can't go back, and there's no way we're letting that happen. I can't do that. And so a band of merchants come by, and they actually sell their brother into slavery. Hey, it takes care of the problem. They don't have to kill him. There's no blood on their hands. They go back and tell Dad that a wild animal had killed him. They take his robe, rip it up, put animal blood on it, and the problem's taken care of for them, right? Well, a lot happens after that. At 17 years old, Joseph is sold into slavery. 17 years old, sold into slavery. Well, he becomes quickly, because of the favor of God on him. And this is something that even happens in our lives today a lot of times as Christians. When we're operating in the Spirit of God, we will find favor sometimes in the world, in our jobs, in places we have no business having favor, because the Spirit of God does such incredible things through us. Well, he's working in Joseph, and his hands on Joseph so much that the prison guard basically lets Joseph run the prison, because everything Joseph touches works. And he has the freedom to move around and do things and even watch over the other prisoners. These are all the king's prisoners. These are not hardened criminals. These are people the king has had put into jail. So Joseph spends quite a number of years there in the prison, in the teens, 12, 13 years in prison. And so During that time, just before he's put into prison, I skipped this part, forgive me, he goes to work for Potiphar. After he's sold into slavery, he goes into Potiphar's house, and the same thing happens. He's running Potiphar's household, and it's wonderful. And Potiphar, everything he touches is prospers, everything he does works, and all that is good. And so one day, Potiphar's wife decides, hey, this is a good-looking Jewish man. My husband's gone. I'm going to take advantage of this. And several times she makes advances at Joseph. Joseph, being a righteous man, ignores those advances. One day, to her own embarrassment, he leaves her and won't stay with her. She grabs his wrap and, out of her just pettiness, accuses him of trying to attack her because she doesn't want to be embarrassed. Potiphar has no choice, throws him into prison, and that's where the prison story I just told you picks up. So all that's fun. It's a good story. Joseph is in prison now. He's there for a number of years. While he's in prison, the cupbearer and the baker of the king have been thrown into prison. Well, during their time there in chapter 39, they begin to have dreams. They begin to have dreams of they don't know. They're just dreams. And Joseph, being there, says, hey, I can listen to your dreams if you want me to and see if there's an interpretation. So they tell him the dreams, and Joseph prays about it. He says, yes, there's an interpretation. The cupbearer, your dream means in 3 days you're going to be lifted up out of here and you're going to be back into your old job. The baker hears this and goes, hey, that's cool. What a great thing, right? I'll tell you my dream because it had 3 in it too. And Joseph said, same thing, except in 3 days, your head's going to be lifted off and you'll be impaled on a pole. Not such a good interpretation, but both come true. Joseph says, the only thing I ask is to the cupbearer, not to the baker. When it happens, don't forget me. Well, the cupbearer gets restored 3 days later, and sure enough, forgets about Joseph until the Pharaoh starts having dreams. And when the Pharaoh starts having dreams, he brings all his magicians, all his sorcerers, all the wise men of Egypt into this place, and they begin to try to interpret the Pharaoh's dreams, and none of them can do it. None of them give a satisfactory answer, and he has the same dream over and over. And so the cupbearer says, oh, wait a minute. I knew a guy in prison that could interpret dreams. They said, well, get him here. He's a young Hebrew. And so they clean Joseph up, get him presentable, bring him before the king, and the Pharaoh looks at him and says, I hear you can interpret dreams. And Joseph says this, absolutely not. I do not do it, but my God can. And so Joseph makes sure he puts the credit where it goes. And he says, God can interpret your dreams if he's willing. So Pharaoh tells Joseph the dream, and sure enough, Joseph interprets the dream and predicts 7 years of bounty and then 7 years of famine, and instructs Pharaoh, hey, look, you need to get your wise men on this and be ready to take care of the long haul, because 7 years is a long time to go through famine, and make sure you take these 7 good years and use them wisely. Well, Pharaoh's impressed. He says, this is it. I understand it. I know it's what it means. And so who wiser than you to come and do this? So Joseph goes from being a favored son to being sold into slavery to being favored in the house of Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's guards, to being thrown in prison and shown favor there. But now he's second in charge of all of Egypt. Every bit of commerce, everything that happens in the agricultural world, which is most of their world, runs through Joseph. And so for 7 years, he helps people store up, and he collects enough for the whole country to be okay. Can you imagine working on that scale? And because of that, he is available to be there when the famine hits. Now, the famine doesn't just hit Egypt, it hits all the surrounding areas, including his family and their lands. And so people from other places are having to come into Egypt because Joseph has done such a good job managing all of this. There's room to sell their produce off. And so Jacob sends his sons to Egypt to get grain. They come back, and when Joseph recognizes that his brothers are coming to town to get grain, he wants to do something about this. And it goes through a lot of different things and goes through a lot of different moments here. I'll let you read the story. It's really a great story. But in the end, they don't recognize him because he's years later and he's got a beard. He's speaking to them in a language they don't know. And he sets up several events, and eventually they find out it's him. He weeps and cries and is asked about his father. He's still alive, and that's good news. He finds out about his younger brother Benjamin. That's good news. And great story, right? Great story. They're still nervous. They're still scared. They will be scared even after, especially after Jacob dies later in the story, because they think, okay, now he doesn't have to protect us anymore because father's dead. And he tells them, look, great line, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. So he doesn't hold it against them. He shows them grace. Again, Christ-like moment. But he shows them this grace and says, look, God had all this intended all along so that these things could come to pass. And actually his dreams from childhood actually come to pass, because everybody has to come bow down to him to get what they need. Now, again, great story. But here's the point. Because of this, remember, God told Abraham, once I start blessing you and I create a people out of you, they will spend a significant amount of time enslaved in another country. Well, this is that time, because during this time, when Pharaoh is so pleased with Joseph that he gives him the land of Goshen, a land near Egypt, and he says, use that land, take that land. He brings his father and his brothers. They move into that area of Egypt, and they begin to produce. And imagine, America's only 250 something years old, and look at the millions and millions and millions of people living in America. Well, they were in that land for quite a while, and enslaved in Egypt for 400 years. So imagine how massive Israel is becoming. Well, because of that, it says a Pharaoh who doesn't know Joseph comes on the scene years later. And because that fame has waned and they're not in trouble anymore, and you know how the things are on the news. If you wait a few minutes, the biggest story of the day is not the biggest story of the day anymore. Matter of fact, we forget about it. Well, the same thing happens to the new Pharaoh. He doesn't understand Joseph. He didn't know Joseph. Hey, thanks for the story. Thanks for doing what you did. But now this people, these Hebrews that are gathering in this land, are growing so fast that if they want to, they could come and overtake us. And so I can't have that. So he decides to put them into slavery and takes away all of their possessions and puts them in a situation where they have to make bricks all day long, and they become an indentured people. And so the beauty of the story is God uses all of this, from prophecy to promise to Abraham, promise to Jacob, renaming Jacob to Israel. Now Israel's family is brought to safety in a land where they could be nurtured. Think about this. You don't put a baby out in the house by itself for the first time. You put it in the nursery. You put it in a crib. This is kind of the crib, the nursery, where Israel, the people of God, are going to be formed. And so they have the safety of Egypt around them for a while, and they begin to multiply and grow and become a people, and they're all of the same lineage and line because of the way it's gone down, and God's hand's been on it. And they've formed the 12 tribes of all the names of Jacob's children, and now they are a people. Well, their first introduction as a people, once they've been established, is to be put in slavery. And they'll be enslaved for 400 years as God gets them ready for the next step, which we'll pick up on next week. And so, again, Genesis is so important because it establishes the beginning, the creation. It establishes God's plan of salvation. It establishes God's promise to all of his people, including us. It establishes a people. And the rest of the story from here out is all about following the people of God until we get to Messiah. And so it all is encapsulated here in the book of Genesis. And I hope you go back and read the details. I went over them very, very briefly and very lightly. That's not the point of our video. Go do a deep dive, read these things, look at the story. It's an incredible story, and see how God brought this about. But for us, in the big picture, it's all about God establishing the people of Israel. And now we can take off from there and follow them throughout the rest of their history. So join me next week as we pick up at the end of the slave time and see what God does next.